Perfectionism is waiting to finish a video for half a year because there is a single shot missing that has to be taken in autumn. Perfectionism is being afraid to touch the knobs of a synth for 2 months because you're afraid of losing the sound. Perfectionism is dust spotting every single picture on a roll of film, even though you know that you will probably never show them to anyone. Perfectionism is spending 5 hours editing a 3-second time lapse. Perfectionism is making a paper cutout animation of all your cameras for a video, even though you know that saying, "Hi guys, welcome to another video," is probably the more effective intro. More generous people will probably call perfectionism attention to detail. And I'm definitely guilty of showing a lot of attention to detail in many of my pursuits, to the detriment of actually finishing anything. That's definitely one of my problems. I start things and then I spend way too much time on things that really don't matter so much, or that no one will notice, or that only I know is there. But I can't help myself. It's just one of those bad habits, and I've had this habit for a very long time. Many years ago, my supervisor at uni told me to have the courage to leave gaps, and I still can't do it. And this was probably about 20 years ago now, so yeah, learning effect, 0. The truth is that this is probably more covering our asses than anything else. We like to stay in control and we're afraid of losing control, and that's why we put a lot of attention into detail, because then we feel like we're in control of that detail, even though that's an illusion too, and we're not in control. So yeah, it's making sure that nobody can criticize us, because nobody has any reasons to criticize a time-lapse that has been edited for 5 hours, especially when it's only 3 seconds long. So I'm a recovering perfectionist. I've come far, I've made some good strides, but the video where I had just one shot missing, yeah, I finally posted that 3 months ago, so I think I still have a lot to learn in that respect. In this video, I want to show you some techniques I've learned to combat this problem and show you exactly how I fail anyway. I struggle on, and sometimes I manage, sometimes I don't, but I'm working on it. And that's the idea behind this video, to show you how I'm working on my perfectionist tendencies. Almost a year ago, I took a songwriting class from Brian Eno. It was online, it was run by the School of Song, and it was a very big class, and it was all, virtual presence. And I think it helped me in this respect, because there was one exercise that he did in practically the first lesson, which was to set us a timer of 20 minutes, and we were supposed to write a song in 20 minutes. How? My reaction as, a recovering perfectionist was, of course, that's not possible. It's literally, no, it can't happen. But if Brian Eno tells you to write a song in 20 minutes, you're gonna at least try, right? So I tried, and I actually managed, which was a big surprise to me. So I didn't have time to overthink. I practically chose the sound I was going to use by typing in a random word into the search bar and picking the first sound that came up and running with it. Even though it was not perfect, I didn't make the preset myself, I didn't make a humongous Eurorack patch. No, I just chose a random sound and I started from there. And with this, I started laying down a melody, and I was exploring resampling a lot at the time. So I was resampling, picking effects, and doing this, doing that, warping, click, 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 click. And when the timer went off, I was actually finished. I mean, not entirely, obviously, but I had all the elements of the song and a very good idea about the arrangement, It wasn't yet put down yet, but it was there. This was very surprising for me because I can take months to finish a track. Sometimes I spend weeks on just a single element, and then another, and then another, and then yeah. I might be working on several tracks at the same time, so it's not quite as bad as it seems. I don't get super stuck or anything. I just don't finish stuff so quickly normally. Maybe if I'm in a really good place with something, it takes me a day, but still not 20 minutes. So of course I was extremely suspicious of this and thought, yeah, no, that can't be any good, right? I only spent 20 minutes on it. How can it be any good? The problem was I actually liked it better than some of my tracks that I spend a lot more time on. And yeah, I guess there's such a thing as overworking a track, you know? So, something to consider. A learning experience. Definitely a learning experience. And that was the idea. I was taking a course and I learned something. And that was the power of limitations. In this case, I was limiting the time that I had available. And in that time, I wrote all the elements of a track and it worked. It's really cool, actually. And it was a sort of powerful realization because the more I listened to that song, I actually liked it more and more. And there was something raw about it. Maybe I overcompensated later on when I was polishing the track, when I was mixing and so on. But overall, I think I spent much less time on this track than any other track on my recent album, Dreams Long Forgotten. And yes, this track made it on my album. And not only that, when Alberto from El Manto Records and I were talking about single releases, he brought up this track. And I was, what? I wrote it in 20 minutes and he thinks it's nice enough to make it a single. So yeah, that taught me something, definitely. In part, this is of course because I knew my instruments really well. I know Ableton like the back of my hand by now because I've been using it for years. So I can just click, click, click and be done because I know it really well. And if I have to struggle with a new instrument, maybe with hardware that I've never used before, of course it takes me longer. So there's always that aspect. It also goes to show that if you know your instrument well, you can just play from the heart rather than overthinking everything. And I'm really glad that I learned Ableton to such an extent. So there was definitely not just 20 minutes in there. There was all my experience from years and years of using this program. So that's something to consider. You can be less perfectionist if you know your instruments well and know what you're doing. So it's not so straightforward to say, I wrote this in 20 minutes and there was nothing to it. And no, I didn't do this on a new instrument. I knew my instrument well, and that plays a role. I guess it all boils down to limitations. What made this 20-minute project work was that I didn't have time to overthink. I just had to do it. I didn't have a million options to choose from, so that really helped. At the time, I was also reading this book here. It's called Limit Yourself and Unleash Your Creativity. It speaks more from a perspective of design perhaps, but I think it's also really relevant for music and all sorts of other creative pursuits. It goes for different examples of how you can limit yourself, and the exercise that Brian Eno gave us was also like this. In this case, he wanted us to limit our time that we spent on the project, but this also limited other aspects too, because we couldn't spend ages looking through different presets, for example, or choosing instruments or whatever. We had to make decisions really quickly, and that limits you to the first thing that comes to your mind, so to speak, and that actually really helps. You can also limit your instruments, for example, or maybe the processes that you use. For example, you could choose to use a random process for one of the elements and then write around that. There are different ways of limiting yourself in the context of music, so you can choose that to constrain your direction and that might make stuff get done more quickly, like in 20 minutes, for example. But of course, just because I learned this for one of my projects doesn't mean that I actually follow through with this in all of the things that I do. Like I said, I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I still act in a perfectionist way many times. Just recently, in the context of the album that I just released, I did something extremely perfectionist too, and that was to make a font. Yeah, music, font making, very related, right? Alberto from El Manto Records wanted to have hand-stamped spines for the tape release. And yes, that's also a very perfectionist thing to do, I would say. He's seeking the imperfections of a handmade release, but that means he has to hand stamp each spine, which is a very perfectionist thing to do. So yeah, we get along very well. Of course, when he proposed this idea, I thought, how am I gonna have the same font on all my videos, for example? And yeah, why would I have to have the same font on all my videos, you may ask? Yes, that's a very valid question. That's, the crazy person talking. But I was set on that, so I actually got myself a very similar stamp from Temu. Yeah, it cost me very little. It was from Temu. And then I set about making a font that is truly variable, like a stamp font. So I hand stamped the whole alphabet many different times, and then I cut out each letter and put that into a tool that is called Calligrapher, with which you can make handwritten fonts. And yeah, that involved hand stamping it many times, then scanning these hand stamped things, then cutting out each letter one by one and putting them into the form of Calligrapher, and so on and so forth. Because I didn't just want 3 variants, no, I wanted many more. And yeah, I know, that's a super perfectionist thing to do for something that is supposed to be not, perfect, because hand stamped is supposed to be not perfect, and I do still have a problem with perfectionism here. But yeah, this way I could also have an excuse to delay the animated album art that I wanted to make for Dreams Long Forgotten, and procrastinate on that a bit, and because, I needed to have the same font as on the tapes. Of course, digital has to be the same, right? So, yeah, I know. But at the same time, now I can use this font thanks to my attention to detail. Crazy person. Thanks to my attention to detail, I can now use this font in all my videos, on all my pictures, and in all sorts of situations. And I'm very happy with how the font turned out. I'm proud of it. That's why I'm mentioning it in this video, right? I'm making a video about it so that it actually makes sense that I made this very perfectionist thing. But hey, I'm making progress here. I wrote a song in 20 minutes. And I also recently made a video where I actually posted pictures without editing them. Yes, I know. That's kind of crazy, right? I actually put pictures that I shot straight out of camera into the video without any further edits to any of it. It is my Lumix, so it has real-time LUT, and I chose that beforehand, so it's sort of pre-edited for the colors, and I just ran with that and put those straight into the video. I also used real-time LUT for the video, which also bakes in the color correction for that. That's also not very perfectionist. And I also ended up making a super quick Photoshop edit on the thumbnail picture, where you can see that I edited the cover art on top of a camera that I was actually holding. And since I was on a tight deadline that I had set myself for no good reason, I actually had to leave in the camera straps because there was no sensible way of removing them that didn't look silly. So I now have a thumbnail picture where my fingers are still a bit wonky, and the straps of the camera are still showing, even though it's supposed to be an album cover, and I'm leaving it like that. I'm forcing myself to leave it like this. And I'm now speaking minutes about it because I don't have a problem with this at all. Did anyone notice? I'm not sure. Maybe they did. Maybe they laughed about it. I certainly would have if I had seen it. And yeah, no one criticized me for it. If you now find the video and criticize me for it, then that was kind of, shooting myself in the foot. But nonetheless, I made an effort here. I was less perfectionist than usually. So I'm making progress. Please acknowledge that. I may be a crazy person, but I'm a recovering crazy person. So how about you? Do you have tendencies like that, or are you the complete opposite of this? I know that I'm a bit strange with this, and not everyone is like this. Sometimes this helps me because attention to detail sometimes helps, but most of the time it just gets in the way. Do you also feel like this sometimes? Or are you just, get it out the door, don't really care about the details so much? If so, I envy you. I wish I could stop overthinking things. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It really helps out my channel, so I would really appreciate it. You can also support this channel on Ko-fi. There is a link in the description. And there you can get early access to my videos or download the music in them. This really helps out with more complicated projects, and it keeps this channel running. And also, if you're one of my supporters, you can also have my new fund. I make music. Why? But hey, I have to make this make sense somehow. If you enjoyed the music in this video, you can also check out my bandcamp. All the music you heard in this video was from my new album. And if you still want a tape, there are still some available too. So if you like handmade stuff, now's your chance. I don't think they're gonna be there for a very long time. So if you want to buy a tape, now is the opportunity. In any case, I hope I see you soon for another video. Bye!